to episode 29 of Radio Omnicore. I am your host, Colleen McLintop, and you're listening to the show that is guaranteed to teach you something useful and introduce you to a dynamic and interesting guest. Dr. Rudnick is back in the co-host chair today to help interview our guest, Beth Ann Galvin. Beth Ann is the founder and MD of Business Communication Skills Holdings. She has spent the last 33 years overseeing the delivery of tried and tested coaching techniques and training methods to help corporate professionals and senior executives become proficient in the area of public speaking and interpersonal communication. We're thrilled to host Beth Ann today as we explore ways to become better presenters, more confident, and also understand the realities of being an entrepreneur in the South African context. Well, Beth Ann, it's wonderful to host you in our studio. We had the privilege of sitting in on your workshops with our Women in Leadership program, and we really learned a lot. The team that attended just found it so beneficial. And today we're going to explore a little bit more around your tricks and what's kept you busy over the last 33 years. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit of what's keeping you busy right now?
Thank you, and thanks for having me here, both of you. Really great opportunity, very excited. Yeah, well, keeping me busy. I'm a lot more focused now and a bit more choosy about the work, that I take on and the partnerships that I form. And I just say that from the point of view that, after having over 3-decade experience and exposure in the business environment, that I've got to the stage that I really want to just work and partner with projects where I can truly add value, that it's not necessarily about the ego of signing that particular account or having that name, on our client list or testimonial, but to work in areas where the client is really focused on the outcome, rather than achieving training points or whatever the BEE scorecard requirements are.
So running your business for 33 years, you've really seen the context in South Africa change. And I heard from that some of it is not just about winning the business at all costs. It's around being authentic and feeling your own comfort of working with different clients. Am I right?
Absolutely. During the startup era, and in those days, the term startup hadn't even been coined, but I realize now, looking back, that that's exactly what we were. And as you would know for yourselves, when you started and got your own business off the ground, you take whatever you can get and you're really chuffed and pleased about that and give yourself big pats on the back for any type of partnerships that you can form. But in more recent years, I've realized that authenticity and credibility is the most important thing. And I really want to be true to myself, and I want to be true to the clients and the individuals that myself and my team partner with. And, as I said earlier, the most important thing is, can we make a difference? And can we inspire and skill these individuals to be better than they were before they started engaging with us, and more effective and more impactful in the marketplace?
And Beth Ann, I think you've been through quite a cycle with your business. You started off, you built it, it became really big. And now you're kind of decluttering, doing a Marie Kondo on your life. So now you've downsized in a way, but become more efficient in how you're running your business.
Yes. I really enjoyed the years of having a big team around me. Also, what you learn as a leader, that I never really had the privilege of having anybody to groom me. I started very young. I was 22 and suddenly I was running a business. I was doing business development. I was HR. I was head of finance, and I really had no exposure or coaching in that particular environment at all. So, it really was about the life of live and learn, sort of as you go along. And there's no doubt that I and my business wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for the many fantastic team members that we had over the years. And we certainly wouldn't have been able to reach the amount of corporates, companies, individuals that we have, and hopefully help them to be more effective. But I've really come to a stage now where I feel that I've hopefully mentored the team members, many of them, not all of them, I think would say nice things about me today, but the majority would. I have many of them that are still in contact with me today, and I'm still in contact with them, and that really makes me feel good about things. But it's got to a stage where I feel I just want to take my energies and really focus it on the areas and aspects that I love and want to do, rather than having to be responsible for team members, for their drive, for their motivation, for their upskilling.
I mean, maybe just for the benefit of our listeners who are not sure of your core offering, I mean, maybe you could just give us some detail around that.
Yes. So if I could talk from a marketing perspective, because that was my original training, our payoff line is turning talk into effective business results. And when we founded the company, I say we because we were a few partners in those very early days, but dare I say, I'm the last woman standing, and my partners were men, and each of them, just were fantastic, and I learnt and grew from them as well. So, getting back to what our clear vision and focus was to equip delegates, at that stage, middle to senior executives. We were the first, if I could say, skills training organization to enter the marketplace. So we were true pioneers, focusing at a middle to senior management level, because, again, I say in those days, there were a couple of training organizations that offered 10 or 15 different skills training topics in their portfolio, from time management to whatever it might be. And we literally took a very critical topic and need and skill and made it our core focus. So really focusing on middle to senior management in the aspect of interpersonal skills. So people-to-people communication rather than written communication, for example. And just helping them to take their everyday talk and to convey a message with confidence and clarity and get the desired outcome that they're looking for, as well as achieving a win-win outcome for the colleague that they're engaging with or for the client, that they're interacting with.
So this is a little bit like personal branding on a communication level.
Yes. So personal branding is actually one of my great passions. And, the area that I focus on now is assisting individuals to blue chip their brands, giving them the guidance and direction in terms of what is it that could possibly be holding them back, from a conduct, engagement, personal appearance, communication style point of view. Or they're already quite effective and quite successful, but what could they be tweaking or fine-tuning to assist them to up their game and, really achieve greater results? But if I can just clarify, when we started out, the company we launched was under the name of Business Presentation Skills. So we were very clearly focusing on purely how to prepare and deliver an effective business presentation. And of course, like all startups will have experienced, it was not an easy path in the beginning, having had no track record and no existing, dare I say, product or service, that we could refer testimonials to. However, I'm really proud of the fact that we built up a very solid name in the marketplace. And over the years, we had the same clients coming back to us, over and over again, which of course, is always the best place that any business wants to be in rather. And eventually it got to a point that those clients said to us, but what else can you do for us? And the challenge that I then faced was, because as you would know as well, that once you're an effective facilitator, you've got the personality, you've got the ability, you can communicate well, it's easy to then train on any topic. And we really had to pull the reins in and say to ourselves, we are not going to become all things to all people, and we're going to focus specifically in the area, from an interpersonal point of view, of getting business, helping our clients rather, to get business, keep business, and grow the value of business. So that sort of umbrella statement would encompass we then brought into the fold customer service, fundamentals of service excellence skilling as well. So because you're only as good as the back end team, you can make all the promises and you can deliver and you can put out your very best front. But if the back end team then lets your promises down, obviously it's going to impact the value of your business going forward. We included in our fold client excellence, sales and influencing skills, and presentation skills. So that is really the gambit of the area that we focus and specialize in.
So sales have really changed, and I think in our area it's always an ongoing challenge that we work with knowledge workers who don't typically see themselves as salespeople. Do you do some coaching around teaching knowledge workers that they are sales and how they close the deals?
When you say knowledge workers, you're referring to?
Like psychometrists and psychologists, our products are quite technical.
Yeah.
So I think changing the mindset of why sales matters and how do you grow, like you said, grow your business, keep your business. I like that tagline.
Yes.
Develop. Instead of just waiting for business to come past.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. So really, my career is based on selling. I still sell every day. I've been the front runner in terms of bringing the business into our company, nurturing and building the relationships, even though I've had business development teams, working with me. And I really focus on the fact that everybody in the business is absolutely in sales. I mean, Priscilla, I called in earlier just to check your address and location, was a fabulous shop window for your business. The way she engaged with me, I really felt that she was attuned, that she was attentive, that she cared about me getting the right information, even though it was just communicating an address. And the majority of our clients in our sales and influencing work are actually bankers and engineers and IT professionals who are not people that would typically ever think. In fact, they don't think, even when they arrive, they're told to come on the program, which is obviously you want people that want to be on the program, not told to be, but we're pretty good at winning them over, is that everybody's role, they influence that project that's currently underway, and without question, your psychometrists, the way they engage, the way they communicate with your clients will, I'm sure, have a direct impact on the loyalty and the future business and commitment that you have from those clients going forward.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of feedback regarding their customer service and their responsiveness. They really are very, very good to their customers. So I suppose it's around not calling it sales, but the way that they share the brand and how loyal they are.
That really says a lot for your business and for the brand of the business, because sales today is not what it was thought of 30 years, 3 decades ago. Really, to be effective as a representative and a brand ambassador for your organization, the foundation is about building trust and rapport. Okay, so, we're often approached, do you have a workshop on closing the deal? We're not closing. And the truth is they're not closing because they're missing the elements of building the trust, the rapport, the credibility. And I firmly believe, we can teach the 5 methods of how to close a sale, the alternative close sale, method or whatever it might be. But if you've built trust, rapport, credibility, if your colleague or client, because colleagues are also customers, we also have to work every day to build their, trust and credibility with them so they'll be more responsive to us. So, if we build that solid foundation, without question, the close will come naturally.
Maybe my question is really how trainable are people when it comes to these skills? I mean, if you take the spectrum of interpersonal skills and you have some people who just naturally seem to be endowed with them, and then the subgroup who it's very alien to them, how much plasticity is there in improving people's skills?
Yeah, that's such a good point that you make, because the truth is, and the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So the absolute magic wand for someone like myself in the skills development and coaching business is that we'd always want to have people in our room that are there willingly wanting to grow and learn. And, it's a bit like the 80-20 principle. It's the 20% that are generally quite successful already that are the ones that are the most attentive and the most open to learning and growing. So, that, of course, can be a challenge. And in organizations, they can invest tenfold, as you know as well, I'm sure you've experienced, in certain individuals to try and get them to a level of performance or get their attitudes right or whatever it might be. But our approach is that we approach every group or individual that we work with the intention of first gaining buy-in from them. Because if you start telling from the word go, there's or you start approaching it from the point of view that you were told to be here, you'll now sit up and listen. Of course, you're not going to cover ground. So we always have the approach that these individuals have great ability and we are going to show them how much more effective they can be. And fortunately, we're in a fantastic line of work, particularly from the presentation skills point of view, because that's one of the rare skills elements where you can truly help a person to see, and they see for themselves that in such a short space of time, in a 2-day period, how they start at, let's say, level 3. They come in at level 3 and they see this for themselves because they do a review of some clips, practical skills element exercises that they do. We DVD record. They're able to see themselves on the DVD and review themselves, not only hear from us, but, see for themselves. And then continue that process, 3 or 4 more times, and for them to see in just those 16 hours, what they were able to achieve. And it really is very heartwarming. They walk out on air most of the time. If they're 12 delegates, a good 10, if not all 12, will walk out being able to go back into the marketplace the very next day and really change their approach and see far greater results.
But then what are you doing in the training to enhance their skills? So it sounds like you do a kind of diagnostic thing. You video, you watch them, and then you equip them to be able to communicate more effectively. How does that look?
First of all, our approach is never to break down an individual. There are organizations that, they take individuals right back to basics, but in a way that the person feels completely depleted. So our approach is always to work on a build up. So we just start by, there's obviously some foundational exercises that take place. We get the delegates relaxed, we get them interactive, we get them involved, and we then ask each individual, we give them a little bit of time to prepare, just to do an introductory talk on themselves. We give them specific guidelines. And at this stage, we haven't really even attempted to teach any skills or techniques or told them what's right or what's wrong. And we capture that exercise on their own personal DVD. We never play that DVD back to any of the other delegates because it's a big fear that it's funny that they'll deliver their presentation in front of everybody, but it's very different if it was played back on a screen. So that becomes their personal measurement tool. And only from then onwards do we start introducing step-by-step elements of how to become more effective. And at no stage on the first day do we, as the coach, tell the delegate what they've done right or wrong. They get a homework exercise. They each get to take their DVD recordings home, and they get, again, some very specific guidelines that they need to follow in terms of how to review their DVD recordings. And the first thing is, what do I like about myself? Okay, so we make them focus. It's very easy to just focus on the negatives. And they also get given guidelines on how to present their review back to the rest of the group the next day. And I can't tell you the difference in persona that comes to the front of the room on that second day without actually having been given any input from the coach, just through that personal review. They've obviously been given tips and techniques on the first day. So that's the approach, and then on the second day following that, we start to give them each as individuals specific guidelines and coaching, so that by their final presentation they've upped their game even further.
So this presentation skills and the ability to speak up, I think, is vital for people's careers, and particularly women. As you know, we run the program, and you were part of it. Do you see a difference in women and their ability to speak up? Do they require more support, or have things changed over the last while?
Yes and no, in terms of, the support that they need. From a delivery point of view, and again, this is a big, wide, sweeping statement, females, just from who we are as young girls, little girls, and how we treat it, and, how we then enter the workforce, and not always having good female leadership role models. And of course, that's the area you and I work in, to try and create, an environment where there are that many more role models, so that it makes the new entrants' lives that much easier. I have found that very often with my female delegates, just in terms of body language, there is often a display of girlish style. And what do I mean by that? So instead of using your hands in a solid, open palm manner, there's a bit of a limp wrist. So the hand is a little bit floppy. And it's such a small thing, but just to tweak that, how it elevates the presence of that particular individual. Again, with females, as you and I know, Colleen, the more excited, happy, sad, aggravated, whatever emotion we're feeling that we get or we feel, the higher and squeakier the voice can become, because we start to communicate from the throat instead of from the nice resonant spoken style from the stomach. And researchers found that the higher, or rather, let me reverse what I'm going to say. The more resonant the vocal sound, the lower the sound, the more authoritative and credible it sounds. So it's just little elements like that. And on a probably a more important scale, in terms of just day-to-day communication, I think women in meetings, in the boardrooms, where they want to, and again, it's just a generalization here, but in the will and the want to really stand our ground and be heard, it's sometimes possible that the approach comes across as sounding aggressive, rather than assertive. And the intention is just to make a firm point, but it's not communicated in that way, and therefore it doesn't help our progress, going forward and getting buy-in and getting promotions, whatever it might be. So those are elements that, can be worked on and groomed, and a difference can be made.
Are you referring to like a kind of subtext of gender differences over there? So is there double standard, like assertive men, could be seen as appropriate, but you're saying women, it could come across. Do women have to moderate, in your view, consciously the way that they present themselves to avoid that kind of labeling?
Yes, I would agree with that. And of course, it's not okay for men to be, overly aggressive or whatever it is in their style. But I do feel that there's more leeway given. And I know this because I work, the main area you asked right at the beginning, Colleen, what I'm doing these days, currently. And my absolute passion is coaching one-on-one in interpersonal skills, communication, strategic presentation, effectiveness. And so, I work with men and women, but very often with the women, they on boards, exco, whatever it might be, that this is a challenge that they face. And you know how it is if you're having an argument with your husband or wife or whatever it might be. If the one shouts, raises their voice and the other one raises their voice louder, but you can't do that, in a boardroom leadership role. And so for women, I do think I wouldn't like the playing field to be different. I really don't think that that's fair. But I think just for their own benefit, not to prove to any man in the room, but just for their own benefit and effectiveness, to develop the ability, because it really is something, that can be honed, and the skill, can be applied very effectively. Just to speak with authority, not with aggression, and, to be seen as assertive, but not clawing their way, trying to claw their way through the supposed glass ceiling.
I think it is a challenge, because I think typically, for me, not so much the aggression that comes out as women just don't say anything. So in the coaching clients that I've experienced, it's around how do they take their place at the table. So a lot of self-doubt. They've got things that they want to say and they want to express, but they're worried that it's not going to be taken well. They're worried they're going to be challenged or they're going to be rejected. So just actually getting people women in particular, to express that, and men. I mean,
Yes.
I don't want to make it a gender thing, but I think it's a life skill learning, and while we don't teach it to kids at school, to be able to stand up in a room, even if you're going to be terrified, and just feel that you've got the skills and the hacks of how do you do this. I think it's such a wonderful gift that people can learn.
You've hit the nail on the head. And something that I would love to do is to work with matriculants going into, they may be going to varsity or skills development colleges, or going straight into the workforce. But university, you say school, which is true. School, I think today there are some schools that start to talk about entrepreneurship, and they do have to present certain show and tell topics, and they might be given a little bit of input, but it's not nearly enough. So just, to expose matriculants at the end of their matric year to the smallest elements that can make the biggest difference. Going for an interview, and, what your body language says, how you present yourself as well, from possibly, physical appearance and grooming point of view, and just making it easier. So when you move into the workplace, I'll give you an example. I remember, and I'm not going to mention one of this company, and I'm talking 20 years ago, they one of our top performing blue chip listed organizations at the moment. And I remember working with their graduate students. They had a program on the topic of blue chipping your brand, how you represent the company as a brand ambassador. And at that time, it was the era where business casual became the big topic. We moved from business corporate to business casual, and by casual, there were no guidelines. Just if you feel relaxed, the thought was you would be productive and you would do good work. But the top executives in the business were all men. They all wore suits and ties, even through that period. And at the very least, they'd wear an open neck shirt, so that would be the casual for them. And these young females had no role models. So, of course, they came in their funky clothes and, fashion conscious. They're all of 22 years old, 23 years old. But going forward, it was going to have an impact on them. I felt very strongly about that. So, I tried to get through that, even though, in terms of corporate, what would you call it, the guidelines that you're given when entering the corporate environment, attached to your contract, your employment contract, was very lax. Rather dress for the position that you want to be in than the position you're actually in. And, at that time, I think that really it didn't land well with a lot of young women. But I think today there's a much better perspective on that topic. And it's not about wearing, pinstripe, Carducci skirt and jacket suits or whatever it might be. If you're in a more informal environment, that's fine. But how can you package yourself that you're still seen as someone there that really takes turning up to work very seriously, or putting yourself in front of a client really seriously?
Well, I think you raise a point there which I wanted to ask you about, which is giving feedback to people. So it's a very tricky thing if you talking about how you dressed, and maybe you should think about changing the way what you're wearing. How do you give that feedback? Because given the teacher that gave you such terrible feedback, I think that's given you a sensibility, a sensitivity around the damage feedback can do.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances. So what I share with a lot of my delegates that I coach is, what did you present when you went for your interview? Because that's what the individual, the manager, and the organization bought. So how you turned up for that interview is, ultimately the value that they put on you, visually, vocally, and through performance as well. There's been research that's been done, I'm talking female again, sorry, and it doesn't really differ for men as well, it's just tougher for women. I think it's just taken a bit more seriously with women, where women are considered for promotion initially on how they look, and secondly on their capabilities and track record. And it's not to say that a man, that if they didn't present themselves well, they would ultimately get that job no matter what. So in terms of giving the feedback, I also think it's dependent on the guidelines that were given by the company from the word go. Did the company give very clear guidelines? Because if they did, then you have no problem in terms of obviously engaging with that individual. And secondly, are the supervisors, the managers, the senior execs demonstrating what is expected? So if you take Investec, for example, I was there on a Friday for a meeting not so long ago, and I had this debate in my mind whether to wear, some smart jeans, dark blue jeans with a blazer, or not. It's Friday, a lot of companies, are going in that direction. And at the last minute, I made the decision to wear just my normal corporate, gear that I would wear on any day of the week. And do you know that every single individual in that company was so well turned out? So they did allow jeans, but, the level of how they packaged themselves, and many of them weren't wearing jeans, they were wearing corporate attire. So that says something about the culture around the way you present yourself. So in terms of giving feedback, you can give direct feedback as long as the more senior people are walking the talk. And the guidelines that were given in the beginning were really very clear. But it's a very sensitive conversation to have.
Because some people you don't know, although the people have shown up for coaching and they want to improve and they want to grow. I guess it all depends on how seriously they're taking it. And at the end of the day, people will resonate with some feedback and not. And
that's it. And I would position it, in the good old adage or manner of the sandwich technique, is first telling them, something really positive, sharing with them something really positive about themselves, possibly in work performance, and then possibly tackle, the dress issue, and then round it off with, they've really got great potential, and just by tweaking these couple of areas, they're going to uplift their presence in front of their colleagues.
Yeah, I heard of a very awkward situation where somebody had a colleague with really bad body odor and just didn't know how to start getting into a conversation about it, and actually didn't really do anything about it. I mean, what would your advice be around such sensitive issues?
It's funny, Hilton, that you just raised that, because as I was speaking now, I was thinking about a situation that I had where a client approached me. They wanted me to tackle, the issue. But, I think it's something that needs to be addressed by the manager or the team leader. And it's so sensitive. And of course, the last thing we want to ever do is hurt somebody's feelings. I mean, it's the last thing we want to do. But then at the same time, I think of myself that if I were, let's say, engaging, walking around, interacting with a body odor issue, or overpowering, it could be the other side, overpowering perfume or cologne, whatever it might be, I'd rather know than not know about it. So, and body odor can be a medical condition, but there are some solutions for that as well. And I think you just do that person such a disservice by not tackling it with them, because I'm sure it isolates them from their colleagues, in the workplace. You can never put them, so they never have the chance, of career progression, because you can never put them in front of clients, and it must affect them socially as well in their home. So it's very, very sensitive, and I think it's just the way in which that conversation takes place.
Can I ask you about some of the difficult, maybe psychological issues in terms of performance anxiety? And I remember at school I was used to dread having to go up in front of the class and do a speech, and as an adult I also, those things lingered. And it takes a lot of effort to kind of overcome that. How do you address that, and is it actually solvable?
So performance anxiety is something that I could say confidently, because I have engaged with literally thousands of executives over the years, that almost without exception, every executive faces in one level or another. For somebody it's just one, it's a small level of anxiety, but they know how to manage it. For somebody it's absolutely, they become completely frozen.
Right.
Okay, so that is an absolute reality, and that's the key area of our work. And I've also found with my experience is that the biggest hindrance in being an effective communicator is our own mind. So it's really, to a great degree, mind over matter. So getting ourselves, or helping, the individuals, the delegates, to really believe in their capabilities, or, that there is no way on this earth that they're going to make a fool of themselves, because that's really the biggest fear, is I'm going to make a fool of myself. And really working from a mindset point of view, and then the actual, do's and don'ts of stand like this and move like that and speak like this become a lot easier. And so it's about a positive mindset, and we do share, a couple of techniques, such as affirmations, positive affirmations, knowing that they, encouraging them to know and see that there's no audience that comes into the room that expects and wants the presenter to fail. You go there going, there's this subject matter expert, and I'm here to listen to this individual. So there's, the audiences are generally on side with you unless you're not performing, to a level that holds their attention. But you really make a very important point, is fear of presentation is a reality, and we need to be very sensitive to that, and, not just to bulldoze through going, come on, get over that, move on. And if we take myself as an example, I was a very reserved kid at school, very introverted. I never participated in anything. So not speech and drama, not the fashion show, not the play, you name it. I didn't participate in anything. And the last thing that my parents or friends could ever have imagined would become my career is the career that I'm in. So, I myself have suffered and do still struggle with anxiety. I never take any presentation situation for granted. I was asked to help out just to fill a 30-minute slot. And 2 days before they asked, please, Beth, it's the sales conference, please can you just fill this 30-minute slot? And the truth is I could roll out of bed, pull on any of my visuals, and I could add value, I worked for 2 days flat in preparing what I was going to say for that 30-minute presentation. And, that's myself centering me to have the confidence and to manage the anxiety to present my best self, and you owe that to your audience as well, to present your best self to that audience. So I never take any workshop or presentation for granted.
And then, maybe just more of your personal experience. Once you get going on the presentation, are you fine, or do you feel a level of anxiety all the way through it?
For me, myself personally, yes. No, with the effort that I put in, and, another key element that we emphasize to our delegates is rehearsal. Is in most of the corporate teams that we work with, they'll tell us that they've, every month they have this major pitch, it's worth millions and millions, the outcome. And then I talk to them about, how they manage their dry runs, and almost without exception, they don't do dry runs. Each person needs to just come up with their little portion, and on the day they hope that the pieces will fit together, and so it goes. So a big part of managing anxiety is through, rehearsal, dry runs. But on the other side, if you haven't been given coaching, or somebody, it doesn't have to be a professional coach, it could be a colleague possibly in the business, hopefully they're giving the right kind of input, that you can practice until the cows come home. But, as we know, practice makes permanent. So, if waffling and mumbling and umming is your style, and you practice for 8 hours like that, you're just reinforcing that style. So rehearsal, dry runs are absolutely integral to managing the anxiety and having a good experience. So with myself, I always start off with a bit of anxiety, always, but I then get into the flow, because it's a mindset thing. You can't allow yourself, I say to myself, Beth, you've put in the work, you've researched, you've really done everything you can. I get there early. So to this particular summit, my talk was only at 11:15, but I actually got there for the start of the summit, which was at 9:00. Hear what topics the other presenters are speaking on, what element of my talk they're touching base on, and then course correcting, or in my talk or my presentation, course correcting or making reference. So it just shows that I've put in some work and some preparation to what the other presenters have said.
So what would your things, your top things that you love about presenters? How do you evaluate a really good speaker? And then also, what are the things that irritate you the most?
Yeah. So there's no doubt that passion, is going to be the standout. And, to such a degree that you can have presenters, that are so passionate but actually quite poor, from a body language perspective. But the audience overlooks that because they truly talk from the heart. They truly connected to their topic. So passion is integral, but you do need to have a balance between the two. So again, in my experience, the majority of business execs that we've partnered with over the years tend to be more functionally orientated, because that's how we've been groomed, through university, through the graduate program in the company and the mentoring and whatever is. Know your topic, know your topic, know your topic. So the easier part is just to regurgitate what you know and to become a walking, talking brochure, basically. Less are typically just natural communicators with natural verve and energy and style. But if you can combine the two, so you give the ones that are quite analytically focused, first of all, the ability to tell a more interesting story. Okay, so it's not just what you know, but how you tell what you know. And then to do that, with a level of commitment and belief in your own topic. So that would be the ultimate goal that we would work to trying to achieve. And that's what I enjoy the most in communicators. And, if you think of TED Talks, some of them, and I can't help but critique because it's so ingrained in me. Some of them are not the most polished presenters or communicators that you'll ever see, but their ability to tell a story and their commitment to their story, you see and believe that they live that story every day, is what makes their presentation so special.
We're doing a gig with a client right now around their call center agents, and one of the tricky things is hiring the right people who can influence, who can really have the right kind of skills. I mean, what would your recommendation be? And I know this is a little left field, but if you were assessing people to become call center agents, what would you be looking for?
So I have worked with call centers in the past, and I have to say I admire those individuals so much. It has to be one of the toughest lines of work that an individual can go into. And of course it depends what it is that they're selling. But, many, as we know, are having to deal with, I don't know what your client's area, but is it selling or dealing with complaints?
It's less selling, it's more inbound, so it's dealing with clients who are phoning in and saying what's going on with this or that.
So they could be irritated or irate.
Yes, often.
So, I think the one characteristic that would be so critical in hiring that type of individual is self-drive and the ability to not take things personally.
Yes.
So you have to, to motivate. So the self-drive are meaning that, when you think of yourself, if you're in that position and you've dealt with 3 complaining customers in a row, it's very hard to then pick up the phone or answer the next incoming call with an upbeat tone of voice and care in your voice. So that takes a very special individual, to be able to do that. And then to motivate yourself, to separate yourself from the emotion and deal with the issue. So not to get hooked in, so that by the 5th and the 10th and the 20th call that you're responding to, that you can come across as fresh as your first call of the day. And I'll say, honestly, that's easier said than done. It's really easy. And the more, encouragement that can be given. I worked with a very big call center, and maybe this is something that your client could do, that had some kind of an incentive and lots of fun activities that happened in the call center environment. And it wasn't only about the person that managed the most calls in the day. And that's what a lot of call center agents are faced with, is they say you cannot spend longer than 30 seconds on any call, but you must deliver customer service. You must be caring, you must get a positive end result, but your target is to get through 100 calls a day. How can you be customer centric when there's a time deadline, on your call? So the measurements for the incentive, they need to think very carefully what the measurement's based on.
So a lot of that applies to, in fact, facilitation and doing workshops, because so I've been training for 25 years or so, and I'm always amazed at those feedback forms. People say the strangest things, and it does feel in a way that, you can give your heart and you can be a real expert, but you always get those 3 people on the form who are like, she's 2 out of 10, and so not taking it personally is a really important quality, I think, when you're running workshops, because people show up with all strange expectations, and I think you need quite a lot of resilience.
That's so true. And, not just myself, but the facilitators that I have on my team, that are, they all of them were initially my clients working in corporate and loved so much the skill that we added to their business, and they joined our team. But we all take it very personally. And you know what? I think it's a good thing, because it isn't. Obviously, we shouldn't take it that personally that we lose sleep overnight, but that we take it personally to try and assess, is this individual making some sense? Or, you engage with that individual for 2 days, you're in the coaching, the personal coaching space. So when somebody, just has that approach that nobody can add value to their life, not you, not their partner at home, not their manager in the workplace. So, to really pull the right aspects out of it. But I think by taking it seriously, it demonstrates how seriously we take our work. How seriously we take our work. But of course, the key take home from those feedback forms should be, if there are 12 delegates on the program and 10 delegates gave really great reviews, obviously it speaks for itself. But is there anything that we could learn, from the other 2, maybe it's, they said something like there should be more practical experiences, and maybe that's something we could do.
Do you agree with sending feedback forms? Do you think it's important?
You know what? It's expected from the client who's paying for the service. So we collect the forms, we summarize it, and we send it back to the client. I don't think that people in general rate as they would normally if they weren't sitting in front of you. So, if it was an anonymous email, that was sent out afterwards, but we know most people don't respond to those kind of things anyway. Like the motor car, the motor dealerships, they do that, and they send now. I see they send emailed survey forms. Then I think people are more honest. So in fact, I'll give you an example. I was at my motor dealership the other day, and they gave me the feedback form there and then, just as I was picking up my car. And I literally gave them a 10 out of 10 for everything. But I wasn't in a position to do that because I hadn't even really taken stock of, and again, my car actually came back for the second time. I haven't even gone back to them yet because I haven't had the time to. With an issue I'd asked them to resolve already the previous time that I was there. So I think, I'm only in a better position now, Anyway, feedback forms, I think they have to be done. Whether they give a true reflection or not, I'm not sure.
I've got one more question because I know we're kind of getting to the end, right? So in our leadership development courses, we do quite a lot of training on listening skills. And one of the things we really emphasize is reflective listening. So being able to, the person speaks and you be able to reflect that. Does that have a place in your world? Do you see that like in the corporate world as being useful?
Not only is it useful, it's fundamental. We do also focus on that aspect. So when earlier I referred to building trust and rapport. And if you're not listening effectively, and if your colleague or client doesn't feel listened to, you may think you're listening. Most of your conversation is just shut down in their mind. So it's a fundamental skill for communication effectiveness. And when I speak sales and influencing, we spend probably the first half day of a 2-day program just focusing on effective ways of listening.
It's interesting because it's very fundamental to therapists. And I find in those workshops where we're working with corporates that it's a novel skill, but very hard to internalize. When we were training therapists, we would spend like 3 months on that foundational skills to get people to make it just like a natural thing. And it seems like quite a big ask to have people get the mindset change around reflective listening in a short workshop.
That is probably one of the biggest challenge areas, that we face as well, because it's not a skill, like I said to you, standing up and standing tall.
Right.
Stand up, pull your shoulders back, look what a difference that makes. You can see an immediate and effective result, and tomorrow they can go out and do that. And, most of us are bombarded in our minds with all sorts of different thoughts and things that are happening in our lives. And it's got to be one of the most challenging skills to truly connect and hear, and not listen to just what we want to hear, but hear what we weren't expecting to hear. And I really like that technique of reflecting back, because that is a listening skill, because it's reinforcing in your mind what you heard, and it's also demonstrating to your audience that they were heard. Yeah. So, but I hear you, and in terms of therapy, I've always been in awe with therapists, how they can sit hour after hour after hour, and they must be focused to a great degree because they're able to reflect back. So so to develop that ability is really something phenomenal.
Okay.
So in the space that we play, it's a very over-traded market, as you know. You alluded to it earlier on in the episode. How do organizations spot the fake trainers from the real ones? Because everyone's got a professional profile. I have many such individuals coming and telling me they want to train at Omnicore. And when you actually get them into a training room, although they have this fancy CV, highly qualified, how should organizations select ethical trainers?
So it's a challenge I face as well. I mean, we're all in the same, business environment at the moment. And, that's the one thing I really miss from 3 decades ago, where you sold, when they were buying a training intervention. They bought you. So it was about face-to-face engagements. It's about, really selling yourself, because they're buying you and the caliber of who you are. Because a CV, it could be a fantastic CV, but that doesn't make somebody an effective facilitator at the end of the day. And very often it doesn't. So, probably the best way is to give them some exposure to yourself in action. Possibly if you had a little video clip, I know a lot of people in our field are now doing that, sending video clips. And but it certainly is a challenge. So the biggest advantage that we can have is getting ourselves in front of the decision maker. And I'm sure you're also finding that today they're asking for a quote. There's no engagement whatsoever.
Right.
It's a learning and development person that engages with you. So it's not the divisional head that has the problem in their environment. And that becomes a real challenge. And if they're asking you for a quote, they're asking 3 other people for a quote, and ultimately they're going for the cheapest quote. And then the divisional head only finds out during the training intervention, what the difference is in quality of offering, but now the training spend is gone.
And also it's becoming, people want less and less time. So where you would run a full day workshop, they're like, can you do that in an hour? And you can't. I mean, you simply can't give the same quality. Yeah. So just as I end, I wanted to thank you so much. About 5 years ago, I was still in my own business and I came to chat to you. I don't know if you remember.
I do.
And you were so generous and such an amazing mentor. And I know that you do that a lot for many people. And I wanted to thank you for all the people that you helped, because you really were a good listener. You supported me. You were very kind. And I'm really grateful always for that impact that you had at that point in my career.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. It's always my pleasure, and I just do it naturally. And, I just love to help people to be more successful in their lives. And, you need to just give generously and not expect anything back in return. And yet we have, in later years, formed a relationship and partnered, and it's been great. Thanks,
Thank you
Colleen.
so much.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts from you?
No, thanks very much. I think that's been very illuminating.
Thank you, Hilton.
Thank
much
you so
appreciated.
much.
Sure.
Okay. Presenting and public speaking is tough. If you can master the art of influencing through powerful and inspiring presentations, you will have given your career the GPS coordinates to long-term success. If you need to hone your skills, reach out to Beth Ann for some support and guidance. You can find her details in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share. Your comments are very important to us. Check out our website www.omnicord.co.za for our blog and previous episodes. And a big thank you to Collis Naidu, our producer.